we have Dr. John on the line. How are you this morning, Dr. John?
Extremely well, Mick, and you as well?
Yeah, very well, very well. Of course, Dr. John's from Creation Ministries International, who have their own website, that is creation.com, and you can go to creation.com, get all sorts of questions answered. There's thousands of pages on there, but of course, we're hoping to get your questions sent through to our text line. That is 0401 949 949, and Dr. John can answer them on air, because if you have a question, chances are somebody else does as well. And this week, Dr. John, what are we starting off on?
Well, we're going to continue on a bit with last week, Mick, because I promised that there were some things last week that we didn't get to that we'd address this week.
Yep.
And our regular listeners are going to remember that we were talking last week about an article in the Science News about extinct animals.
Yes.
And there were proposals being explored to see if they could be brought back. And some of the reasons are because in some cases it's been us, humanity, that's been responsible for their extinction, and in other cases people would just love to see them again. And of course the classic Australian case is the Tasmanian Tiger, and man has certainly been responsible for his extinction. And we talked about the last guy known to be alive in the Tasmanian Zoo, a tiger called Benjamin, and he died in 1936, and he's the last. He was the last survivor, as far as is known, because he hasn't. They haven't been sighted ever since. And of course, there's the woolly mammoth, which a lot of people are fascinated by. And the reason they're fascinated, of course, is because nobody really knows what caused their extinction. Because there's millions of carcasses up there in Siberia and elsewhere that were snap frozen by some event, and nobody really has come up with an appropriate explanation of how that might have occurred. There's one of the creation scientists has come up with some ideas, but they're all speculative because we really don't know. But then we think about, how would you go about trying to bring some of these animals back? The tiger would be great. The woolly mammoth would be great, and it seems that the most promising way would be by what they call cloning. Because cloning's been successfully done in the past with a very famous case that most of our listeners would be aware of, the case of Dolly the sheep.
Yes.
And Dolly the sheep was very interesting because she was one particular breed of sheep that had been given birth to by another breed of sheep. And the way that worked is that the nucleus of the cell from Dolly's breed was inserted into the egg cell of this other breed, and the nucleus of that was removed. So what it meant was that when the live sheep was born, and it took a lot of effort to do it, then the live sheep was actually the breed of the nucleus that had been inserted, and this is what cloning is.
Yep. Now,
they're not identical because although most of our DNA and most of the animal's DNA is in its nucleus, there is a little bit in other intracellular structures, particularly mitochondria. And of course, all of that part of the egg was provided by the surrogate mother.
Yeah.
So it's not exactly a perfect copy, but it's fairly close. But anyway, that's what cloning is, and the idea is that it might be able to be used to produce some of these animals that have gone to extinction. It's very interesting, though. I was thinking when I was preparing to talk about this, of the case of in people anyway, identical twins.
Yep.
And identical twins are actually not quite identical. They're very close, because the DNA in their nucleus is the same, but it's not quite the same for the DNA in their mitochondria, because some eggs have more mitochondria than others. Therefore, one of the twins might have a little bit more of the mitochondrial DNA than the other one. So they're pretty close, but they're not quite. But anyway, look, that's the general principle behind cloning.
Dr. John, in Jurassic Park, we saw them put something from a dinosaur anyway, into a frog egg. Can it be done that way? Where it's, I mean, you're talking about, a Tyrannosaurus Rex going into a frog egg. Is that really possible?
Well, obviously the frog egg is not quite the same size as the T-Rex egg, and the frog isn't quite the same size as the T-Rex. But what they've done is to try and get the DNA of the T-Rex into the egg of the frog. Now, of course, little frogs are born from eggs, and so the eggs that frog produced with the T-Rex DNA would probably be a bit small to have a little T-Rex come out of it. So I'm not sure that would have worked.
Yeah, well, I guess the last thing we want is little green hopping T-Rexes all over the planet. And we have Dr. John in the studio from Creation Ministries International. And Dr. John, we've been talking about, bringing extinct species back to life. And what you've been talking about, putting a nucleus of a cell in an egg, that is actually similar to what they were doing on Jurassic Park. So I guess the guys that wrote that movie for Hollywood, they sort of knew what they were talking about.
Well, they did to a degree, Mick, and you just mentioned a funny thing there. You said that they'd inserted it into a frog's egg. Yep. The nucleus of a T-Rex into a frog's egg.
Yep.
And as we know, frogs produce a few eggs, and that would produce quite a few, if it worked, T-Rexes running around. But I thought if they put it into a fish, then you'd get quite a few more fish eggs, because they produce a lot. And we might even be able to get T-Rex caviar.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't want to go swimming if that happened.
That would be something, wouldn't it, Nick? the eater be eaten.
Yeah, well, it'd probably be worth a lot more than Russian caviar.
Yeah, well, that's right. But who knows what the Russians are up to anyway? They could be trying that. But look, seriously, they do want to try something like that. And in the case of the Tasmanian tiger, it would be necessary to find a fairly viable cell from which to extract the nucleus, and that's very unlikely. But they were proposing, I think, that it might be inserted into the egg of a Tasmanian devil, because the Tasmanian devil is it's not really a related species, but it is a carnivore. But you'd then get some sort of slight hybrid of a Tassie devil and a Tasmanian tiger, which would be quite interesting. But look, the one that is most likely to be successful, I would think, and I think Harvard University is working on this, is the rebirthing of the woolly mammoth.
Yeah.
Because they would be able to use an Asian elephant as the surrogate mother, because they are quite a closely related species. But I did have a bit of a chuckle over that, Mick, because as most of our listeners would be aware, when laboratories are using animals for experiments, mice are very good, because they're fairly small and you can produce a lot of them, and they've got a fairly short gestation period of only a couple of weeks. So it doesn't take you long to get a few new mice. And, of course, they're fairly easy to handle. But having elephants as your laboratory animal to experiment on is a little bit more difficult. They take up a bit more room, and you can't carry them from one room to the other. and they have a fairly long gestation period. I think for an elephant it's about 16 months.
Wow.
So, the researchers would have to live for quite a while to be able to do any effective research on cloning mammoths.
Yes, absolutely.
Because,
to go over a few generations.
Well, that's right. And if it took about 400 attempts for Dolly the sheep, you'd be looking at quite a long stretch of time if you were going to get any success with the woolly mammoth. So really, I think there are institutions that would like to give it a go, but when it comes to woolly mammoths and elephants, I think you'd have to say good luck.
Yes, absolutely. But you're saying that they're already sort of working on it?
Well, apparently so. Harvard is certainly exploring it. But the one, we did raise the one about dinosaurs, and I really want to explore that in a bit of in a bit more detail this morning, because getting nuclear DNA from dinosaurs, according to worldly belief, would be fairly difficult. I mean, trying to find a viable nucleus in something that's supposedly 65 million years old is likely to be fairly hard to get any viable DNA from it. But of course, if, as we believe to be the truth, the dinosaurs only really died out about 4,000 years ago in Noah's flood, then that's a different story. You just never know. It might be possible. But certainly, according to worldly belief, I think that would be pretty unlikely.
Absolutely. You're on 94.9 this morning. It is 24 minutes past 8, and we're with Dr. John from Creation Ministries International. And we're with Dr. John from Creation Ministries International. And for the last couple of weeks, we've been talking a bit about, basically bringing species back from extinction, how they do it, and we'll be talking a little bit about how ethical it is shortly. But Dr. John, when it comes to bringing a species back, you've talked about how they've done it with Dolly the sheep. That wasn't really bringing a species back. That was just proof of concept of how they take a nucleus out, put it into basically into an egg and make it grow. You've talked about the fact that they might bring back woolly mammoths by putting a nucleus from one of their cells into the egg of another type of elephant. But when it comes to dinosaurs, I mean, yeah, we've talked about putting them into frogs. I don't know if that's real. Could they put a dinosaur cell into the nucleus into the egg of say a centipede? Say you end up with a dinosaur with 1,000 legs. I mean, can that sort of thing really happen?
Very, very interesting, because in that article I read, what one researcher plans to use is what he believes are the dinosaurs' descendants. And, of course, that's your everyday farmyard chook. Because a lot of our listeners may not realise it, but secular science believes that dinosaurs didn't actually die out completely. They believe they evolved into birds.
Right.
So if you're looking for surrogate eggs to play with, you don't have to look any further than the chook pen.
Right.
And you'll find plenty of eggs down there. But, of course, the question is, are they right? And we've seen a real push in recent years to claim that some dinosaurs have had feathers. Now, there haven't actually been any fossils of feathered dinosaurs found. A lot of claims, but no real evidence. But when evolutionists look at birds, they see that they've also got some scales, because obviously your everyday chook has got scaly legs and so on, as well as feathers. Mm-hmm. And they believe that scales actually evolved into feathers. And there's a couple of other similarities that they believe lend weight to the idea that dinosaurs might have evolved into birds. And when you think about it, dinosaurs and birds both hatched out of eggs, as reptiles do today, and they both have nucleated red blood cells, which we don't have, so reptiles and birds do. And, of course, if you have a look at the footprints of the dinosaurs that they've found in mud, the dinosaur trackways, they look pretty similar to the footprints of big birds like emus and cassowaries and ostriches and so on. But so you can see why they might entertain that thought of evolutionary progress. But it really is total nonsense. And I want to explain this morning exactly why the idea of dinosaurs evolving into birds is simply nonsense. It's a figment of their imagination. And if you think about it, the supposed drivers of evolution, the only way evolution could occur, is by the two mechanisms that they've proposed, that is mutations and natural selection. Well, natural selection is adaptation or survival of the fittest, but mutations are really changes in the genetic code, the DNA. That's what they are. And mutations can only really occur one letter at a time. And we've talked about earlier on this program, not this morning, but at other times, how most mutations are really damaging to DNA. There's no examples of mutations increasing the genetic information. They actually can only work on the information that's already there, and they corrupt that information. And when you look at the difference between reptiles and birds, you can see it's just impossible that there could be that many mutations for evolution of a reptile like a dinosaur into a bird could be. And when we come back, we might just explore that a little bit further, because I've got some information that people might not really be aware of, particularly about the footprints that look similar of dinosaurs and birds.
All right, sounds good. I'm glad we didn't talk about survival of the fittest there, because I can only imagine that a T-Rex is a little fitter than the average chicken. In fact, I think the T-Rex, when it comes to a fight, would probably be happy to eat the chicken and might even, eat it whole. I don't even think it'd spit out the bones.
Yes, well, I think it's going to do some damage to the chicken, and wouldn't even consider the fact that the chicken might have been its son or daughter.
You're on 94.9. It is 18 minutes to 9. Good morning. We've been talking about bringing extinct species back to life, and some of the science behind it, and some of the theories behind what you should or how you should mix the eggs and the nucleus so as they can, grow the extinct species. And we were talking about the similarities between chickens and dinosaurs, and I can only imagine that the reason why we see so many pictures of, Neanderthal people being so big is because the drumsticks were so much bigger. Dr. John, I can imagine a T-Rex drumstick would have been pretty tasty.
Yes, I'm sure it would, Nick, if you're able to catch the T-Rex.
Yeah.
Look, there was this idea of bringing back the dinosaurs. This researcher decided that he might try and use chickens, because they believe that dinosaurs evolved into birds. And one of the things they base that on is the similarity of the imprints that you see in mud or sand. But there is a very big difference there, because although the three imprints, the digit imprints, look very, very similar, the fact is for reptiles the imprint comes from digits 1, 2 and 3, whereas from birds it comes from 2, 3 and 4. So they might look similar, but they're done by different toes. And birds have got another toe called a perching claw that points backwards, and it enables birds to sit on a perch and not fall off, because that claw and the digit that it belongs to, reptiles don't have. And of course the whole idea is that is attached to a muscle, which is itself attached to a bone, and the muscle's got a blood supply and a nerve supply, and the blood supply is connected to the arterial and venous system, and the nerve supply goes back to the spinal cord and up to the brain. And when you think about the number of mutations that would be required to produce that, it is absolutely astronomical. It would run into the millions.
Yeah.
And it would have to occur one at a time. Now, when you think about mutations occurring one at a time, that's going to take quite a long time for several million mutations. And you have to remember that evolution has no brains, it has no direction. It doesn't know what it's heading to. So one mutation at a time, not only would it be almost impossible over the time, you've got to have everything working together right from the beginning. You can't have a muscle that only part works, otherwise the whole thing falls over. So when you think about the number of mutations that would be required just for that extra toe, then you realise how ridiculous it is to even think that reptiles might have evolved into birds. But that's what science really actually does believe. Now, there are many, many other differences that I could go into that suggest that it's impossible, and we might do that at another time. And I've been impressed too by the fact that when you think about it, reptile hatchlings are able to fend for themselves the moment they're born, whereas bird hatchlings can't do that. They need parental nurture, which the reptiles don't need. But look, when we come back, Mick, we said we'd have a look at the ethical problems that are involved in this, and I think it's worth mentioning those before we sign off this morning.
Absolutely. And we have Dr. John on the line from Creation Ministries International. He's answering your questions. Send them through to our text line 0401 949 949. Now, Dr. John, we're talking about bringing species back from extinction, and of course we've seen Dolly the sheep has been cloned. They're sort of on their way to doing it. But what about the ethical dilemma? I mean, to me, I don't really care if they bring back a woolly mammoth, and it sort of doesn't make a lot of difference to me. It just means we end up with a furry elephant. But when we're bringing humans back, it sounds a little dicey to me. Tell me what your take is on the ethical debate here.
Well, look, Mick, you're quite right, of course. Most people wouldn't have any problem with bringing back Tasmanian tigers or woolly mammoths, but you can see where all this research eventually leads. And when the techniques are developed, then clearly people turn their attention to, can we do it with people as well? And I think that's a very difficult problem, because it doesn't take into account the fact, as I believe, that God is active in every conception. And scientists don't realise that it's more than what they think. Is it really ethical? And bearing in mind that Dolly took about 400 or more attempts before that was successful, you're going to look at a lot of wastage of human embryos and things like that. And I think that sort of thing is pretty problematic on an ethical basis. But look, I'm sorry to say it, but I think in this day and age, scientific researchers do whatever they wish, and no matter what people think or object to, they're unlikely to stop. And I think people would be astonished if they knew what was happening in laboratories around the world. And, you might remember a year or two ago there was a whistleblower who had taken some film of discussion between an executive from Planned Parenthood, which runs a whole lot of the abortion clinics in the US, and the selling of aborted fetal body parts, and that was broadcast, and you just don't know what sort of experimentation is done in the various laboratories around the world, but a lot of it, I think, people would be aghast if they really knew. And we've still got this ongoing question about where our current coronavirus originated. And the evidence is increasing that it may have come from that virology laboratory in Wuhan. Even more evidence on the news overnight. So there's lots of things there. Was it a laboratory leak? Was it even deliberate? We just don't know the answers, and it's going to be very difficult to obtain them because truth doesn't come out easily when it's truth that's done sort of damage to humanity. And we need to remember that the Germans did a lot of things in World War II that were very, very unsavoury, and I think laboratories around the world are probably continuing on in that vein. And the best that we can do as Christians is to pray that the truth will come out, that whatever is being done will be revealed. And I feel that's a very urgent requirement for Christians in this day and age. The Word of God says that there's nothing hidden that's not going to come to light, and we need to pray that the Lord sees to it that the truth will come out, and we will know exactly what has happened over this present crisis.
Absolutely. And of course, talking about that and bringing it back to, the ethical dilemma with bringing species back and working on, ancient humans, we say ancient, being up to 6,000 years old, and mixing them with current DNA. Probably won't be a lot of difference, but could be a lot of pain and heartache, and not a very good thing to do. Anyway, our time's up for the day. Thank you, Dr. John. Will you be around again next week? I guess you can't go anywhere still.
No, I'm not going anywhere anytime soon.
All right, well, thank you so much. Another awesome week. If you do have any questions for Dr. John for next week, send them to our text line 0401 949 949.